us being ENFJ men, like, how would you define current masculinity or toxic masculinity, and like, how would you like want to like redefine it if you want to redefine it at all?
That's a good question. I feel like in today's society, I feel like we're kind of at a crossroads with masculinity, but at the same time, it's like you kind of seeing an extreme version. And it's funny because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. And I want on my own podcast of just like masculinity and this whole concept of like alpha and beta and all this different stuff that we've been seeing on the internet. You know, like Kevin Samuels and all these different types of people. And it makes me think because I feel like even if you want to go a step deeper, you know, a lot of people talk about like, well, there's an attack on masculinity in the world and how like there's an agenda to make men more feminine and stuff like that. And I feel like maybe there's some truth to that, but I feel like we're in a day and age where I think we're seeing traditional roles kind of crumble. You know what I'm saying? It's not 1942 anymore. Like, you know, like it's a different world that we're living in. So it's like people kind of want traditional roles in things, but it's like we don't live in that world anymore. You know, and I feel like masculinity now, like you're kind of seeing either one or two extremes. You're either seeing men feel like they have to be super like alpha and macho and super hardcore, gotta go to the gym every day, lifting weights, you know what I'm saying? You gotta be a business owner, you gotta make six plus figures, you gotta be talking to at least more than 5 women or whatever, having sex. Like I feel like that's a more like
At least.
hedonistic, yeah, that's a more hedonistic, like extreme version of like what masculinity is. And I feel like you see the extremes because then on the other end you kind of see some more men embracing their more like feminine, like I guess emotional side. And it's like I guess it's like you're either really really feminine or you're really really super masculine. And I feel like I guess for me, if I had to like redefine what it's supposed to be, I would say masculinity really is just being comfortable in your skin and who you are. I feel like naturally some men are kind of going to lean more to just being, I guess, a more dominant, I guess you could say alpha type of person, you know, like just more in tune with that masculine energy. But I believe that every human has masculine and feminine energy within them. So I feel like if I had to redefine it, I would say it's more so just about being who you are naturally and also understanding that you do have feminine energy as well. You know what I'm saying? Like you do have emotions. Like I don't think God would have created us with tears for no reason if we weren't meant to cry. You know what I'm saying? Like little stuff like that. Like we all have both sides within us. It's more so just about self-awareness and understanding like, okay, I might not be wired like many other guys, but that doesn't make me less of a man. I don't have to put on a front and act like everybody else. Because I used to struggle with that, feeling like I had to start doing certain stuff to feel like I'll be perceived as more manly, even like specifically by women too. Because even women can play into the stereotypes of like, oh, well, if you don't do this, 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 and this, then you're not a man. And I'm like, we gotta stop doing that. Like everybody's not wired the same way. So I feel like to me, like masculinity is about self awareness and really just like being your true self and acceptance. You know what I'm saying? A lot of men I notice they don't accept, I guess you could say, the more feminine aspect of themselves. You know, like you could see it, like, and I feel like I kind of struggle with that too, like, cause I think even seeing my own dad, like, I could tell like he wasn't necessarily always stronger with the emotional parts and having those like tough conversations. And I feel like as men, we kind of got to like change that narrative. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't have to act super toxic and super like overly like domineering. You know what I'm saying? Just to kind of prove like, oh yeah, I'm a man because I go to the gym and I lift weights every single day and this, and this. Like that's not what defines you. Like what is your character like? What is your morals like? How do you treat people? You know what I'm saying? Can you be a leader? You know what I'm saying? Do you know how to respect people? You know, like those to me like are the real traits that define like, okay, that's like real man. So I feel like that's kind of how we like could redefine and change the conversation because we're in an interesting time in the world right now. We're kind of seeing like a lot of extremes, but I don't really think we see like a middle. We're not allowing space for the middle the middle road. So I guess that would be like my perspective.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you're saying on there, especially about that, like the two extremes, and some people, some men trying to be like, not even like they're intentionally, oh, I'm trying to fit in a box, but they're putting themselves in a box. Like, oh, I'm a man, so I got to do this. I got to act this way. I got to be tough. I can't cry. I can't talk about my emotions and everything like that. And with that comes a bunch of like, I think it also sometimes comes from a place of, I think Denzel mentioned it earlier about like talking to other guys about your emotions and them being like, "Oh, I don't want to do that. That's gonna make me look gay." Like of insecurity of their masculinity, causing them to like press more outwards and like to show others or whatever that they are masculine. But for the question, you said the question was, how would you define masculinity? Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that can be interpreted, but in my opinion, masculinity or being a man, one of the main things would probably just be sticking to yourself, like being who you are as a person at heart and in your mind, and not gravitating towards any one specific way as a result of another person like making you do so, or you trying to fit a mold of someone else. Rather, you over time like accumulate your own understanding of everything surrounding you and how you should act and how you should portray yourself in the outer world, and or in a family dynamic or whatever it might be. And that you're just, you know who you are as a person yourself, and that no one else's opinion or subjective thought on that will define if you are a man or not. And it, again, for me especially, it's kind of hard to put my finger on it, because masculinity can be like, it can be, the term can be understood in a lot of different ways, but it's kind of hard for me to put my finger on it other than saying that, like what masculinity would be, other than the actual like definition textbook term of having more traditional male characteristics, like being bigger or taking more of a like authoritarian, I forgot what the word was, but taking more of a like a leadership role or whatever, and being in charge. But like you said, there's not as much of a middle ground. It's more people, like especially with like the times now versus what they were way back in like the 1900s, like early 1900s. It was really traditional then, but also now there's some things that are coming up that are so like opposite of traditional. It's like, where do you find the middle ground? Because like I feel like the truth is somewhere in the middle ground, and although it's not like concrete, it's just something that is still yet to be completely like spread across the people in a way, because a lot of people just see it one way or the other. They're like, oh yeah, you have to be masculine, you got to have a traditional role, you got to be like in charge of everyone and everything. And some people just don't care, and they think, oh yeah, it can be either way. And I think that it should be being understanding of both sides, and that at times you do need to play a more the bigger role in making decisions and pressing for something that like, and like doing an action for something that you believe in, or whatever it might be at mind and heart, that you are driven to do what is at your heart or morally correct or right, like what's doing the best for you and the people around you, and not just completely disregarding what other people feel or want just to get what you want. Like, it's in a way doing the best for as much as you can, even though you can never please everyone. It's kind of like doing the best that you can do to do good for as many people as possible. And although everyone's not able to do that, some people are going to play roles that are bigger and have people following. You're just as much of a man being up here at the top. You just have different roles. All the people following are the people that make up everything underneath them. And without all the people that were playing the smaller roles, the bigger role would serve no purpose. So it's like you can't really just have one or the other. You have to have all of them come together for it to have any like masculinity in general at all. Like there's going to be just two ends of the spectrum, some in the middle, and understanding both sides is kind of important. But as for toxic masculinity, all I'm going to say, I think it's really stupid. And it's just, I've met tons of people that are just, it's people like that. I mean, I hate to say it because I don't mean to not take anyone serious, but if you're just going to be like super, super intentionally masculine and just like disregard anything involving feelings, disregard anything involving like a woman's opinion or whatever, just because you're the man or whatever, is like, I'm just going to roll my eyes and I'm not going to take you seriously. And I just usually leave it at that. I think it's stupid and you're trying to prove something on purpose because you, for some reason at heart, don't feel adequate enough to just like not have to prove that to everyone. But that's how I see it.
I would define masculinity as, and femininity for that matter, as a certain collection of social roles and expectations that humans have operated with in a variety of ways for several thousand years at least, and that we then encoded into our stories and symbols. So I think that's one of the reasons that it gets complicated to have discussions like this, because we use masculine and feminine both as ways of describing different social behaviors, but also as ways of describing like different character traits or different symbols or different ideas. So if I'm talking about the social expectations, I would say most of the social expectations associated with one or the other are basically a collection of ideas saying where you get your value from. So for men, some of them are getting your value from having a large income or being physically strong or being physically or emotionally tough, and saying like that's your identity. That's what it means to be a man. Or that's what conveys value on you. You know, you're valuable to society or to a mate or to yourself if you fit these roles or do these things. And the same can be said on the feminine aspects. On the other hand, because humans have dealt with, let's say, sexual polarity for as long as we've been human, and probably longer, like we take those ideas and project them onto our stories. So for example, you can watch Sleeping Beauty and see the prince rescuing the princess as a man rescuing a woman, or you can see it as one symbolic archetypal idea bringing out the expression of another symbolic archetypal idea. And in that world, like the masculine principle is usually defined something like that which reaches, and the feminine principle is usually defined as like that which awaits the reaching. But those are very difficult to discuss in our society because they're things that operate on the realm of emotion and intuition and abstract ideas, and our society doesn't tend to value those very highly. And because we have gotten into a habit of assigning, masculine principles are found or should be found in biological men, and feminine principles should be found in biological women. And that's not, as some of you have observed, the way it works. Like everyone has what we would symbolically call masculine and feminine principles within them. And I would say that a lot of this like ties into the toxic masculinity thing too, where it's like we've got certain messaging saying this is where you find your value or identity as a man. And then I would say much of toxic masculinity is fueled not necessarily, I mean, some of it's conditioning, some of it's like, I was raised to think this is what a man is, so I'll raise my children to think that. But for a lot of it, it's fueled by people who want to make money off of you or have power over you. Like, it's sex sells, the masculine image sells, the feminine image sells. So it's not really like a lot of our culture is influenced by that. And I would say that's particularly the case because our main interaction with artistic and symbolic and archetypal things is through like media. So, and media is often aimed at making a lot of money, or taking advantage of whatever the current social perception of masculinity and femininity is in order to make money. So it's not really a agendaless exploration of the symbolic principles. And I would say that as far as moving past like toxic masculinity and the finding identity and value in masculinity and femininity in general, I would say it's really helpful to start operating in that symbolic world, to see that the things that you've thought of as masculine are largely a set of ideas or ways of being that you can step into and out of at will. And you do that by getting to know those ways of being and those symbols and stuff, and then practicing like adopting those ways of being or shedding them as you wish, so that if you need to, like, you know, let's say you need to bring a lot of masculine energy to a football game or something, or like interviewing people who are super into football or something, like you can do that. You recognize this isn't my identity. This isn't who I am any more than, you know, I'm just a teacher, or I'm just a parent, or I'm just a friend. They're all just roles I play. And then I would say that for our society, it's really going to be important for us to do that on an individual basis, or at least on a, not necessarily just individual, like we need to get better at interacting with those different roles and ideas outside of just our media or our societal expectations about them. Because when you start doing that, you get to choose how you bring those energies into your life instead of seeing them as roles that you have to fulfill in order to have value or identity.
Dang. Well, I don't know what y'all want me to say after that. I'll come at it from a different angle, because I don't think I can express that do that any better justice. For me, as a Christian, right, and this goes kind of back to our previous argument, our previous discussion, rather, of, you know, absolute truth. This is kind of where I build everything off of, and so I don't know that I necessarily have a good definition for masculinity, but I do have an explanation for how I express my masculinity. And I think that the root of that, it's protect, provide, and pursue, right? As men, given the biblical precedents all up and down the Old and New Testament, we have a responsibility to protect, to provide, and to pursue. When we show up somewhere, we leave it better than when we arrived. We make sure that we provide a healthy foundation. We make sure that we have fertile ground with which to grow the things that we chase after, and desire and create. And so I believe that's what it means to be masculine in the world. And I think the reason those three words specifically have always just held up for me is because it allows a wide range of expression within that, right? Somebody who's quote unquote more feminine can provide, he can protect, he can pursue. Somebody who grew up in the middle of the South driving a big old pickup truck, smoking cigars, can provide, protect, and pursue. You know, the same way somebody who grew up in the middle of the city, who grew up with all girls in the house, can do the same thing. You know what I mean? And so it really allows for a wide range of expression. As far as the toxic masculinity thing, I don't know. This might get me kicked out the group. So I just don't buy it. I don't believe in toxic masculinity. In the same way, I don't really believe in toxic femininity, which almost never comes up in discussion. I believe in toxic behaviors. I believe in reactions. But it seems like I don't know. It seems like toxic behaviors are more like a reaction to perceived threats to the masculinity of like a subset of men with low self-esteem, right? So it's like, I think a lot of men respond in toxic ways when their masculinity comes under threat of being taken away, right? If you come at your boy and say that he's weak, or you say that he's a girl, or you say that he's lazy or can't do anything, a lot of men specifically with low self-esteem or low emotional awareness will respond in a toxic way. And I think that, the term toxic masculinity it's a catch-all term for anything associated with anything negative and aggressive. So anything that happens in all of society, if it let alone if it comes on the behalf of a man, but if it happens in a way that is forceful, and in a way that is perceived as just negative, is deemed toxic masculinity. And I disagree with that. I think you can express masculinity in a way that's harmful, in the same way you can do that with femininity, but it doesn't make the femininity or the masculinity itself toxic. C.S. Lewis, who is a famous philosopher and a writer, he talked about, sorry, I keep going back to the Christianity thing, but he talked about sin not having an essence, right? He always talked about the fact that sin wasn't a tangible thing in and of itself, but it was the privation of good, which basically means like a cancer, right? So a cancer isn't a thing, but it's a deformed cell. It's a cancerous cell. If you look at a regular cell, it's round. If you look at a cancerous cell, it's starting to dissolve and disintegrate. And that's what he called sin. It was whenever you took something that was good and deformed it and turned it into something else. And I think that's what people are referring to when they talk about toxic masculinity. It's not the fact that masculinity of itself is toxic, but rather it's just expressing itself in a way that people with low self-esteem would demonstrate. So that's kind of my opinion on it.
Respect.
Yo, I'm really glad that you shared your opinion. Despite I'm really glad to hear all of us perspectives on this. This is great. I don't have too much to add to any of that. If anything, I was more interested in hearing what y'all thought, because honestly, I don't really know myself how to quote unquote redefine masculinity. So I was more intrigued to hear what y'all would think about that. But I do know that I don't want the rigid idea of masculinity to be something that's standing anymore, because then we're teaching our kids, again, if our son cries, hey, yo, you a little bitch, stop crying. It's that's not wholesome. You know what I mean? Don't teach him something like that. It's everything, even when we listen to rap music, again, excuse my language, but everything's oh, you little, and it's just come on now, really, that's how we, if you're a real man, doesn't do this, a real man. And it's just I don't really know. I think, and then especially thinking about with women, a lot of women, I mean, shoot, single mothers, they protect, they provide, so it's we're even with masculinity, we're not saying oh, women can't bring this. I think that if anything, the biggest thing that I just want to harp on is the fusion of both. And I love what Emmer said too about how this has been something that's been kind of placed on us from long time ago. And I'm not against gender roles. I think that it's good to at least have personally speaking, I think it's good to have okay, we have a baseline of what we think, and then if we want to rearrange, we can rearrange. In my household, I live with my wife, and then I live with my roommate who's also female than her daughter. And shoot, I do more of the sweeping in the house. I do some of the cooking in the house too. I wash the dishes, but I'm also the one who drives all of them. I'm the only one who has the car and license and all of that, and yeah, as of this moment, up until literally just when we moved to Atlanta, I was the breadwinner, and now my wife, she's making, she's landed such an amazing job, and look, she's making more bread than me. I am not complaining about that. Somebody might look at me, oh wow, a real man, But look, like if she's winning, I'm winning. Like that's all that matters. I'm still secure. She still respects me, and we have joint bank accounts. She trusts the way that I use money, and everything that she's about to like spend or whatever. Like she even when we're like tipping the waiter or something, she asking me like, how much should we tip? Stuff like that. Like I'm not gonna lie, it makes me feel like a man. Like, this most of this is your money, but it's like I'm the one who's like paying off the bills. I'm the one who's doing this. I'm the one who's doing that. She could do all that too, but at the end of the day, it's like I think that like everything is like just like what Lonnie was saying. Like it's interesting the time that we're in, and I think the biggest thing to just pretty much say is like we shouldn't get so trapped in a way that might seem unnatural to us. Like, oh, I'm a man, so I have to work out. Oh, I'm a man, so I have to be unemotional. And which even then, again, like with what Cameron was saying, like who's to say that being unemotional is part of being a man? Like if we just keeping it to protect, provide, like stuff like that, it's like, hey, all right, cool. I think that people being shamed for certain things that we deem as like masculinity, that's the problem that I have. Whereas also when we pervert masculinity, that's when we have toxic masculinity. Like I like what you were saying, Cameron, like in allusion to what C.S. Lewis said about the cancerous cell. Like this is a cell that's pretty much been like perverted and warped, but it's still a cell. It's just, so when we look at toxic masculinity, it's still masculinity, or at least our idea of it, because masculinity, we kind of like created that role, that term, but now it's warped. Now it's coming from an insecure place. What you say? Did you just say something to my girl? Now, in order to protect my masculinity, I gotta fight you. Like this is, and if I don't, then what are my bros gonna say about my masculinity? What's my girl gonna say about my masculinity? She's gonna want to go to another man who will actually, punch a dude in the face and risk going to jail because he tapped her butt or something like that. Now I'm not saying like you just like, oh, everybody just be nice. I'm not trying to say that either, but like I think like reject what masculinity is even saying and just be you. Like think of the most rational thing and don't let other people's perceptions of like, oh, so you're not really a man or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter.
I want to add on. This is probably be the last thing we say about this topic. I think the last thing I want to say about this is like a lot of it just has to do with insecurity and people being too overly concerned with other people's opinions of their lifestyle. To me, that's
I've been there. Yeah,
that's the number one thing I feel like with all of this discussion. Like, a lot of it is just people are just afraid to be their true self and are just too overly concerned with what other people are going to think. And I see that a lot. Like, for me, like, I had to really, like, overcome that and kind of just, like, be me. Like, yo, like, you just got to be you. Like, not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to accept it. Some people might think you're more this. Some people might think you're more that. But as long as you know who you are and the people that, you care about, respect and know who you are, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things if you're not living up to the stereotypical standard of what being a man is supposed to be. I feel like that's the biggest thing. A lot of it comes from insecurity. The more confident you become in yourself, you don't really have to prove yourself as much. And it's funny because we think it's the other way around. We think when somebody's confident, oh, they got to prove themselves all the time. No, you don't. Like, if you're confident in your masculinity and who you are as a man, I don't need to prove to you that I am. Like,
look at Prince.
I just know I am. Like, I don't gotta prove it to you. Like, I know what I'm about. That's enough. But that's like the last thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, I was just gonna stop that by saying, like, I've been reading this book, Gods in Every Man. I heard about it through.
That. I might have to check that out.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's real. And then I got the other book, Goddesses in Every Woman. It's talking about the anima and the animus. It's like the male archetypes in us and the female archetypes in us, like in all human beings. So like, and I listened to all of like Personality Hacker. They made a podcast series on the books, and they went into every Greek god and every Greek goddess and talking about what energy, feminine or masculine, that they each brought according to the book. So I haven't read the goddesses one yet, and I'm still like, I'm like about 3/4 of the way through this one. I'm like really studying it and highlighting it and stuff like that. It's deep stuff. And I remember when I listened to all the podcasts like some years ago, then I was embarrassed because I of course listened to all the gods and every man one, and I was like, I'm not a Zeus, and I don't really have much. I don't really have like too much Hades energy. Like it's kind of there. Okay, I have a lot of Apollo energy, but I wouldn't say it's my main one. Or I definitely have a lot of Hermes energy, but also I don't think it's my main one either. And then everything else kind of just like fell flat. No Poseidon energy, So I'm just like, dang, interesting. I started listening to the goddesses and every woman, like, whatever, podcast. And I resonated more with Aphrodite than I did with any of the Greek god archetypes. And Aphrodite was a feminine energy, a feminine archetype. So I'm like, I was embarrassed because I was like, whoa. So my strongest energy, my dominant energy is feminine. Boom, 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 and I'm like thinking about that. And I'm like, nobody's ever called me feminine. Like, I mean, I know that I'm in tune with my feminine side, but like nobody's ever called me like effeminate. Like, I don't got that walk, I don't carry myself in a certain type of way. But dang, like Aphrodite is my strongest one. Like that's a feminine archetype. But it took me a while to like adjust to that. And like even now, even saying it like, on camera, like before all of my subscribers and stuff, it's like kind of like what Lonnie's saying, like, yeah, I don't care. Like, because at the end of the day, like I'm still who I am. And if you feel like, yo, that's good, like I'm secure in who I am. And I know, like, hey, it is what it is. Like Aphrodite's my main one. I didn't really relate too much to the other goddesses, It's like Aphrodite, then we got Apollo and Hermes, then we got the Hades energy. I have some Aries energy over there too, and it's just like, okay, I'm seeing like how like these archetypes show up. But at the end of the day, like I'm still a man, period. And I don't have to worry about proving my manhood to other people. And especially my wife, she still sees me as a man, point blank, period. So whatever everybody else is thinking, like that's on them. So yeah.
Well, I'm a Capricorn, so.
Don't know what that means, but me too.
Hey, I just wanted to briefly thank you for taking the time to watch this video, whether it was on regular speed or 2x speed, whatever it was. Just thank you for consuming the content. And around me, you should be able to see a few little buttons and logos for other recommended videos because, I make good content, new ones, but then I also have some really good old content too that you should probably check out. But make sure that if you really like this video, feel free to subscribe, to share. It really helps this humble channel to expand and reach more people and ultimately help more people. So once again, thanks for watching and hope you have a great rest of your day.